The ancient Egyptians kept their religious nature alive through every aspect of their lives, from the pharaohs to the common folk. So it's only fitting that we discuss their religion, and especially their afterlife beliefs in this series. The ancient Egyptians believed that when someone died, their soul would go on a journey. This journey would take them through a number of obstacles and trials before reaching the field of reeds, also known as the afterlife or paradise. But don't worry, this won't be a boring journey, because today we are going to explore it with them. So let's start with the basics. Who do the Egyptians pray to? To start, there was Ra, the sun god who personified the sun. He was worshipped as the supreme god of the universe, but later he became more of a father figure to other gods like Horus, the sky god, and his wife Isis, the goddess of magic and motherhood. Then there was Osiris, the god of the underworld and the dead, and his wife, the goddess Nephthys, who protected the dead on their journey to the afterlife. They had a son named Anubis, who guided the souls of the dead to the afterlife and helped them through the mummification process. There was also Horus, the god of kingship and the pharaohs, and his brother Set, the god of chaos and the desert. And finally, there was Mat, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. Now, the ancient Egyptians didn't just worship these gods and goddesses at temples or during festivals. They actually tried to live according to their teachings. For example, Mahat was more than just a goddess. She represented the ideal way to live your life. To the ancient Egyptians, living according to Manat meant living a life of balance, truth, and justice. It wasn't just about doing the right thing. It was also about doing it in the right way. In fact, the pharaohs were considered the embodiment of Manat on earth. Their job was to keep everything in balance, so that Ra and the other gods would be happy. The pharaohs also had to make sure that everyone else followed Manat. If they didn't, they would be considered enemies of the state. But what did this have to do with the afterlife? Well, everything. See, when an ancient Egyptian died, they believed that their soul would be judged by Osiris. To make sure that they would pass this test, they needed to live their lives according to Manat. If they had done good things and lived a life of balance, then they would be rewarded with a place in the field of reeds. However, if they had not followed Mot, they would be punished. The Egyptians believed that Osiris was very fair, and only those who had lived according to Mot would be allowed into the field of reeds. Now, you may be wondering how the Egyptians knew how to live according to Mot. Well, they had a book called the Book of the Dead, which was full of spells and rituals that were supposed to help them on their journey to the afterlife. One of the most important parts of this journey was the weighing of the heart ceremony. During this ceremony, Osiris would weigh the person's heart against the feather of Mat. If the heart was heavier than the feather, it meant that the person had not lived a life of balance, and they would be sent to the underworld. However, if the heart was lighter than the feather, it meant that the person had lived a good life, and they would be allowed to enter the field of reeds. But what exactly was the field of reeds? Well, it was basically paradise. It was a place where the souls of the righteous could live forever in peace and happiness. The ancient Egyptians believed that this was the ultimate reward for living a life according to Mahat. In fact, many of the tombs and pyramids that were built during the Old Kingdom period had secret passages leading to the field of reeds. This was so that the pharaohs could travel to the afterlife as quickly as possible. Temples were also built to honor the gods and goddesses, and they were also used for ceremonies and rituals. The pyramids, on the other hand, were built as tombs for the pharaohs. They believed that the pharaoh's body needed to be preserved so that their soul could return to them in the afterlife. So they developed a process called mummification. Mummification was a very complicated process that involved removing all of the organs from the body except for the brain. The body was then wrapped in bandages and buried in a coffin. The entire process could take up to 70 days. As you can see, the ancient Egyptians had some pretty interesting beliefs when it came to their religion and the afterlife. They believed that by following the teachings of Mahat and living a life of balance and truth, they could ensure that their souls would end up in the field of reeds. In the next episode, we will continue our journey through the Egyptian underworld and see what happens to those who do not make it to the field of reeds. Until then, I hope you have learned something new, and I will see you next time.